Have you ever felt like something was missing in your life, but you just couldn't put your finger on what it was? Or maybe you felt a strange connection to someone you've never even met. That's exactly what Mitsuha and Taki go through in their story. Even though they live in different times and places, there's something pulling them together, something that's hard to explain. But before we dive into how they eventually connect, let's start at the beginning, when Mitsuha wakes up from a dream that's about to change her life forever. This story begins when a girl named Mitsuha Miyamizu wakes up after dreaming about meeting a boy she doesn't know. Surprised, Mitsuha starts acting strangely, and is even more shocked when she looks at herself in the mirror, noticing changes in her body. Her unusual behavior is also noticed by her grandmother and younger sister. After that, Mitsuha continues with her day at school. She's a high school student living in the small remote village of Itamori, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. After losing her mother, Mitsuha's father also left the shrine and chose to serve as the mayor. Even though Mitsuha is the mayor's daughter, she prefers to live the life of a shrine maiden with her grandmother and younger sister, Yotsuha. The next day, the news on TV reports that a comet, which appears once every 200 years, will pass by Earth in the coming days. Mitsuha, having just finished breakfast, heads to school. On the way, she is greeted by her friends, Tessie and Sayaka, who comment on how neat she looks with her hair braided and tied up, different from the previous day when she looked disheveled. Mitsuha is confused by their remarks. During class, she's puzzled again after seeing the notes in her book, and when she responds to her teacher calling her name, the teacher seems pleased, as if Mitsuha had returned to normal. However, during the break, Mitsuha, still curious, asks Sayaka and Tessie, "Hey, what was wrong with me yesterday? Why were you guys acting weird?" They explain that the day before, Mitsuha was acting very strangely, from not remembering her own name to forgetting where her desk and locker were. After school, Mitsuha walks home with Tessie and Sayaka, expressing her boredom with living in the village of Itamori and revealing her desire to move to Tokyo after graduation, as she finds life in the village to be dull, with not even a single cafe around. That evening, Mitsuha and Yotsuha prepare for a ritual at the Shinto shrine. Their grandmother, who seems upset, talks about how Mitsuha's father abandoned his duties as the shrine priest to enter politics. Meanwhile, their father does not attend the ritual his daughters are performing, choosing instead to focus on his campaign strategy for the upcoming mayoral election. As shrine maidens, Mitsuha and Yotsuha perform a ritual called kuchikamizake, where they must chew on a handful of rice and spit it out to ferment into sake. Mitsuha's friends, watching the ritual, find it gross, making Mitsuha feel embarrassed. After the ritual is over, Mitsuha shouts out loud, wishing that in her next life she could be a city girl from Tokyo. Somehow her wish comes true. The next morning, when she wakes up, she finds herself in a room she doesn't recognize. Mitsuha realizes that she is in the body of a boy named Taki Tachibana, and she thoroughly enjoys her days in Tokyo living as Taki. However, Taki's friends at school start to notice something different about his behavior. Usually quiet, this time he seems unusually energetic, especially when they invite him to a cafe. At the cafe, Mitsuha, who is in Taki's body, is shocked by how expensive the food is, but thinking it's just a dream, she orders it anyway. Suddenly, a notification pops up on Taki's phone, and after reading it, Mitsuha panics, realizing that Taki is late for work. She quickly asks Taki's friends where exactly Taki works. Confused, they explain that Taki works part-time as a waiter at an Italian restaurant. Since this is Mitsuha's first time working as a waiter, she makes a lot of mistakes and receives plenty of criticism. Eventually, a customer makes a serious complaint after finding a toothpick in their food. Overwhelmed, a senior waitress named Okudera comes to her aid, realizing that the customer was just trying to get a free meal with that trick. The customer then tears Okudera's skirt, but Mitsuha, still in Taki's body, quickly helps by sewing it back together, impressing Okudera with Taki's seemingly feminine touch, which is actually Mitsuha's. In Taki's room, Mitsuha accidentally finds a photo of Okudera while checking Taki's phone, assuming that Okudera is Taki's crush. Mitsuha then writes down her experiences from the day, including the praise from Okudera, and before going to sleep, she writes her own name, Mitsuha, on Taki's palm. The next morning, Taki wakes up back in his own body, surprised to find the word Mitsuha scribbled on his palm. Just like Mitsuha experienced earlier, Taki feels strange when his friends at school tell him that he was acting out of character the day before. His co-workers are also envious of Taki's closeness with Okudera, especially when she winks at him in front of them. Meanwhile, Mitsuha, now back in her own body, also finds writing on her hand and checks Taki's notebook and phone. That's when they both panic, realizing that they were actually swapping bodies. Initially thinking it was just a dream, the body swapping begins to happen more frequently, and they eventually accept the reality of the situation. They set ground rules for each other to avoid suspicion and maintain their reputations while not in their own bodies. Mitsuha reminds Taki to be more careful with her skirt when sitting, while Taki asks Mitsuha to stop spending money at cafes. Even so, Taki feels grateful as Mitsuha helps him get closer to Okudera, eventually arranging 2 dates with her. One day, Taki, in Mitsuha's body, goes to the mountains with Yotsuha and their grandmother to a place where the Miyamizu Shrine's deity resides. They go there to offer the sake that Mitsuha had made during the Kuchikamizake ritual, as it is considered a part of herself. After that, the story shifts back to Taki in his own body, who receives a message from Okudera about going on a date, something Mitsuha had arranged. During the date, Okudera notices that Taki isn't enjoying it, as if his mind is elsewhere. When she asks who he's thinking about, Taki can't give a clear answer, leading to an awkward and ultimately unsuccessful date. After the date, Taki tries to contact Mitsuha through his phone but can't get through. Meanwhile, Mitsuha is seen with her friends at a festival to watch the comet. At first, they are amazed by the beautiful light of the comet, but suddenly it fragments, leaving Mitsuha shocked. Taki keeps trying to reach Mitsuha, but the connection never goes through, and from that day on, they stop swapping bodies. Worried, Taki decides to search for Mitsuha in Itomori. He takes his 2 friends, Tsukasa and Okudera, with the excuse of wanting to meet someone. When they arrive in Itomori, Taki is shocked to find that the village was destroyed by the comet 3 years ago, killing 1/3 of the population and leaving a huge crater where the village once stood. Taki is even more shocked when Tsukasa tells him that the disaster happened 3 years ago. When he opens his phone to show the notes Mitsuha often made, the notes suddenly start to disappear one by one. Taki then tries to gather more information at the local library, discovering that Mitsuha, Tessie, and Sayaka are listed among the victims of the Itomori disaster. He can't believe that Mitsuha, who he's been swapping bodies with, lived 3 years ago. If that's true, then not only did his soul enter Mitsuha's body, but he also traveled through time. Taki, Okudera, and Tsukasa decide to stay in Itomori for the night. While talking with Taki, Okudera notices the bracelet he's wearing and asks where he got it. Taki says it was a gift from someone he can't quite remember. The next day, still curious, Taki returns to the Miyamizu Shrine to find the sake that had been placed there when he was in Mitsuha's body. When he arrives, Taki drinks the sake, hoping time would rewind. Miraculously, his wish is granted, and he's transported back 3 years, exactly 1 day before the comet disaster. Taki wakes up in Mitsuha's body that morning, now sporting short hair. Mitsuha's grandmother, suspicious of her granddaughter's behavior, realizes that the person inside Mitsuha's body isn't actually her granddaughter, but rather another soul. The grandmother then reveals that this body-swapping phenomenon has been happening for generations in their family, and once the swapping ends, memories of it will fade away. Taki, determined not to waste this chance, plans to save Itomori and Mitsuha from the impending disaster. He rushes to school to find Mitsuha's close friends, Tessie and Sayaka, asking for their help. Together, they devise an evacuation plan, designating the school as the evacuation point. After that, Taki heads to the mayor of Itomori, Mitsuha's father, pleading with him to issue an emergency evacuation order. Feeling desperate, Taki runs into Yotsuha on the way and urges her to leave Itamori immediately with their grandmother. Yotsuha is confused by Taki's sudden insistence, since Mitsuha had previously mentioned that she was the one planning to leave for Tokyo. In reality, before cutting her hair, Mitsuha had indeed gone to Tokyo to meet Taki. However, due to their different timelines, when they met on the train, Taki didn't recognize Mitsuha because they were in different times. The story shifts back to Taki, who remembers his real body lying at the shrine and realizes that Mitsuha's soul is inside it. He rushes to the mountaintop, hoping to find Mitsuha. Meanwhile, Mitsuha, now in Taki's body, wakes up and heads toward the mountain as well. She pauses in silence, looking at her hometown, which has been erased by the comet. When they both reach the mountaintop, even though they are in the same place, Taki and Mitsuha can't see each other due to the time difference. However, they can still sense each other's presence. Finally, as twilight arrives, their desire to meet is fulfilled through a phenomenon called Katawaradoki, where two dimensions merge briefly just before sunset. With their souls back in their respective bodies, Taki and Mitsuha meet face to face for the first time. Taki then explains that he's planning something with Sayaka and Tessie. After that, he hands Mitsuha her braided cord and asks them to write each other's names on their palms. As Mitsuha tries to write her name on Taki's palm, the Katawaradoki phenomenon ends, and Mitsuha suddenly vanishes before she can say goodbye. Taki, struggling to remember Mitsuha's name, tries to write it on his palm himself. However, his memories of Mitsuha quickly begin to fade, leaving him unable to recall anything about her. Meanwhile, Mitsuha hasn't actually disappeared. She simply returned to her own timeline. Remembering Taki's message, Mitsuha quickly runs to find Sayaka and Tessie to continue with Taki's plan to save the town from the comet's fragments. The plan kicks off. Tessie blows up the power substation, causing a citywide blackout, while Sayaka spreads an emergency warning that a massive fire caused by the substation explosion is imminent, urging residents to evacuate to Itamori High School. Sayaka also asks Mitsuha to convince her father to issue a large-scale evacuation order to the residents of Itamori. Mitsuha races to the town hall, struggling to remember Taki's name as it fades from her mind. Distracted, she trips and falls, realizing in that moment that Taki had written something on her palm earlier. Not his name, but the words, "I love you." Mitsuha quickly gets up and continues her run, finally reaching the town hall. There, she tries to convince her father to issue the evacuation order immediately. It remains unclear whether Mitsuha succeeds in convincing him as the comet appears in the sky, breaking apart into meteors that crash down on Itamori, destroying the town in a single impact. Five years later, Taki has graduated from university in Tokyo and is now searching for a job. Despite his efforts to remember something that lingers at the edge of his memory, he still feels like something is missing. Over the past 5 years, Taki has become intrigued by old news reports about Itamori, which detail how a meteor crashed into the town and how its residents miraculously survived. This suggests that Mitsuha was successful in convincing her father to issue the evacuation order, saving a third of Itamori's population from disaster. Now, Taki and Mitsuha exist in the same timeline, living their lives separately without any memory of each other. Although the memories of their shared experiences have faded, they still subconsciously feel a connection. One day, while they're on different trains, their trains pass each other. They catch a glimpse of each other through the train doors, and a sudden, unexplainable feeling of connection overwhelms them. Both Taki and Mitsuha rush to get off their respective trains and start searching for one another, eventually meeting on a set of stairs. Without any memories left, their instincts tell them that they've found the person they've been looking for. And there they stand, two strangers who feel like old acquaintances on the stairs that separate the past from the future. Although their memories have faded over time, their hearts can't deny that they once shared something more than just a chance encounter. Mitsuha and Taki look into each other's eyes, trying to understand what it is that makes them feel as though they've known each other for years. In an instant, their doubts disappear, replaced by an inexplicable certainty. In that moment, amidst the hustle and bustle of city life, on those quiet stairs, Mitsuha and Taki find what they've been searching for all along. It's not the memories nor the answers to the mysteries of their past, but a sense of completeness. Because sometimes, finding someone who shares your soul is more important than knowing how or why it happened. This is where their story comes to an end, but it's also the start of a new chapter. It's a story about two souls who, even when separated by space and time, always find their way back to each other. Even if their memories might fade and their worlds might change, their fate to meet is inevitable. And now, here they are, standing together, ready to write a new page in their lives. And with a small, meaningful smile, they both say the words that mark the beginning of something new.
君の名前は